Introduction. This chapter develops the electrification of the fleet with hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, the considerations to take into account, the obstacles and the implications for fleet management. Index. Hydrogen. Hydrogen vehicles on the market. Sales of hydrogen vehicles. Electrolyzer. Efficiency of the hydrogen fuel cell vehicle. Hydrogen obstacles. Regional production potential and investment risks. Ways to produce hydrogen. The sustainability of green hydrogen production, hydrogen station, number of hydrogen stations in the world, the largest hydrogen station in Europe, the case of the closure of all hydrogen stations in Denmark, repair cost, usage problems, fleet of hydrogen buses, EMT of Madrid, hydrogen freight transport fleets, implications in fleet management. Subscribe to the Fleet Management channel. Your subscription is a great support to continue making new videos. Subscribe. Hydrogen fuel cell vehicle efficiency. The efficiency of the hydrogen vehicle is very low compared to a 100% electric car or truck. According to Transport and Environment calculations, in the simple act of generating hydrogen from renewable sources, there is a notable loss of energy that places hydrogen for a fuel cell vehicle at 68% efficiency, and that has not yet reached the car's tank compared to 94% of the electricity. Then adding transportation and distribution until final consumption by the vehicle, we would reach 33% energy efficiency for hydrogen and 77% for the electric car and 16 and 20% for a gasoline or diesel car. By 2050, the performance of all these technologies is expected to have improved, but the differences will continue to be notable. 81% for direct electrification, 42% for hydrogen, 22% for synthetic diesel, and 18% for synthetic gasoline. Therefore, the use of batteries will continue to be a much more efficient solution for light transportation than other alternatives. If the hydrogen car is zero emissions, where is the problem if in the end 60% of the energy generated is lost? In principle, and being from renewable sources, one might think that it is not a problem. However, energy needs are increasingly important, and at the same time, Europe has managed to consume less energy than about 10 years ago, mainly thanks to increased energy efficiency, according to the European Environment Agency. The goal is to further reduce energy consumption despite the needs, which could also be interpreted as a way to achieve energy independence. But also, lower energy efficiency would mean a higher cost. For transport and environment, it is particularly evident in the case of road freight transport. Hydrogen in the transport of goods by road. In the case of road freight transport, hydrogen could still make some sense for long-distance travel. According to data from the European Commission, 62% of road freight transport journeys are less than 400 kilometers, and 78% of journeys are less than 800 kilometers, which would be equivalent to a full day of 8 to 10 hours. Journey. These are trips that you would not need to refuel or recharge to complete. Instead of having to wait 8 hours or more to recharge the battery, the hydrogen truck could refuel in 3 to 20 minutes, depending on the range you want. According to Transport and Environment, the unit cost of an electric truck will be higher than the cost of a hydrogen fuel cell truck. However, the cost of energy would play in favor of the electric truck, being cheaper than hydrogen. There is talk of €38,000 per year in the purchase of hydrogen in 2030 and €22,000 per year in electricity.
Learn about our fleet management consulting and training services. Reduce costs and optimize fleet management activities. We electrify your fleet of vehicles. We carry out the electrification plan until its implementation, known as
hydrogen obstacles, lack of infrastructure and complex logistics. Currently, you won't see many hydrogen cars on the road. The enormous lack of charging infrastructure, even in Northern Europe where it is more developed, is an obvious brake on someone being able to buy this type of car. In Spain, for example, there are currently 7 hydrogen stations throughout the territory. and they are all private. This explains why, at least in Spain, Toyota does not sell its Mirai to the public, but only to companies that have a charging point. The installation cost of a hydrogen generator exceeding 1 million euros per unit and has enormous operating costs, with the legal obligation to store 1 ton, for example, does not simplify development. Several billion euros will be needed to cover an entire country. There are only 5,000 kilometers of active hydrogen pipelines, mostly in Europe and the United States, and they are small installations with diameters of less than 45 centimeters, all above ground. There are no underwater ones, and the large part merely connects refineries with chemical complexes. There are nearly 30,000 kilometers of hydrogen pipelines in the project. For example, the corridor that wants to link the ports of Algeciras with Rotterdam, with an investment of 3,000 million euros. But according to the International Energy Agency, only 100 kilometers of the hydrogen pipelines have firm investment. It is expensive to produce, which means that currently on the market it costs almost 8 times more than gas, 230.53 euros megawatt hours, according to the newly arrived Hydrix index. The International Energy Agency estimates that in 2030, the cost of producing green hydrogen will be around $1.5 kilogram, a figure that still seems distant. The data does not suggest that this will change in the short term. Although there are more than 40 countries with hydrogen strategies, only 4% of green or clean hydrogen projects have a firm investment decision. Hence, for example, green hydrogen, at least for now, cannot be a real alternative. The price is prohibitive, about 18 euros per kilo, knowing that 1 kilo of hydrogen allows you to travel approximately 100 kilometers in a car. Without going into details of how much it costs to produce green hydrogen, the reality is that in hydrogen generation, the price of filling the tanks of a hydrogen car is not much cheaper than recharging the battery of an electric car. In the Netherlands, with a price of 19.95 euros per kilogram, equivalent to about 40 kilowatt hours, we would pay 0.50 euros per kilowatt hour. It is more or less the same as in most public fast charging stations, and that is whenever you want to refuel, while with an electric car you can always use much cheaper slow charges or home charging if you have a charging point, where recharging a 70 kilowatt hours battery can cost less than 17 euros, at 0.24 euros per kilowatt hour in the worst case. The demand for clean hydrogen is even lower than production. The commitments set the current production of low-emission hydrogen at 35 million tons, but its demand does not exceed 14 million. Energy efficiency. Due to the complex hydrogen production process, hydrogen cars are less energy efficient than battery electric cars. Fueling a car with hydrogen involves generating hydrogen through electrolysis, compressing it at 700 bars of pressure to be able to transport and store it, and finally converting it into electricity using a fuel cell. Hydrogen is lost in all these processes. According to Transportation Environment, the result is 33% tank-to-wheel efficiency compared to 77% for the electric car. In other words, for every 1 kilowatt hour of energy consumed in the electrical grid, only 100 to 300 watt hours will be used to propel the hydrogen car, compared to 600 to 800 watt hours for an electric car. In a hydrogen car, energy is lost in all stages, from electrolysis to the fuel cell that powers the electric motor through storage. More energy is needed than is obtained to produce hydrogen. A priori, the fact that a car is not very energy efficient is not a problem for it to dominate the market. The car with a combustion engine has been dominating the market for more than 100 years with an energy efficiency that, in the best of cases, does not exceed 46%. It all depends on how affordable the fuel that powers the car is. In the case of green hydrogen via electrolysis, the calculations do not work out because more energy is simply spent to produce hydrogen than is obtained in the end. Using the best current processes for water electrolysis, which have an effective electrical efficiency of 70–82%, producing 1 kilogram of hydrogen which has a specific energy of 143 megajoule kilogram, or about 40 kilowatt hours kilogram, requires between 50 and 55 kilowatt hours of electricity. That is, more energy is expended than what is obtained in return. 95% of the hydrogen currently used is produced via the reforming of methane gas. Although it exists naturally in the bowels of the earth, it is the so-called white hydrogen. It is not as easy to extract today as if it were oil or gas. There is no choice but to produce this hydrogen, either through techniques such as steam reforming. The hydrogen contained in a fossil resource, generally methane gas, is captured, or through water electrolysis. The hydrogen is separated from the water. 95% of the hydrogen currently used is produced via methane gas reforming. On an ecological level, it would be an aberration to increase this production. The processing of 1 kilogram of hydrogen obtained via this process emits about 10 kilograms of CO2. There are methods to capture and bury this CO2, but it increases the price of hydrogen. And for a car that runs on hydrogen to be considered emissions neutral, the water electrolysis method, which does not emit CO2, requires green energy of renewable origin so that the entire process is carbon neutral. Hydrogen as an energy vector. In the end, although the hydrogen fuel cell once promised to revolutionize the automotive industry, it has struggled to compete with rapid technological advances and widespread adoption of battery electric cars. Regional production potential and investment risks. The technical potential to produce green electricity, and therefore green hydrogen, far exceeds estimated global demand. However, the ability to produce large volumes of low-cost green hydrogen varies greatly from region to region. Africa, the Americas, the Middle East, and Oceania have the greatest technical potential, but their realization depends on a number of factors, such as existing infrastructure, the current energy mix, the cost of capital, and access to the necessary technologies. Factors such as government support, investment climate, and political stability will play a crucial role in determining whether this potential can be realized. Despite higher project financing costs in countries with higher risk profiles, green hydrogen investment is likely to continue to flow to these regions, provided the revenue potential is sufficient. This dynamic is similar to that of the oil and gas sectors, where investment often occurs despite significant national risks. However, this trend has its limits, as countries experiencing turbulence may find it difficult to attract investment due to the immense risks involved in doing business in such environments. Ways to produce hydrogen. Hydrogen is the most abundant chemical element in nature and is a crucial resource for the energy transition. Under normal conditions, it is in a gaseous state. It is tasteless, colorless, and odorless, and it is not found freely in the environment, but is associated with other elements such as water-forming organic compounds. As it is not a fuel that can be taken directly from nature, in order to be used in energy applications, it must first be released or separated from the rest of the elements, so it has to be produced or manufactured. Hydrogen can be produced from different raw materials, different energy sources, and by different procedures. Depending on the raw material and the energy source used to produce it, we may speak of 100% renewable, 100% fossil or hybrid processes in a certain percentage. The color assigned to hydrogen is nothing more than a simple way to classify it based on its origin and the amount of carbon dioxide released during its generation. That is, it is a simple way to know how clean your production is, although the color scale is not yet completely homogenized. Gray hydrogen, the most common. Currently, gray hydrogen is mainly produced derived from methane or coal. To obtain this type of hydrogen, CH4 methane or natural gas is used using the steam reforming technique. It is a cheap process, but it consumes a lot of energy because it requires very high pressures and temperatures of 800 to 900 degrees Celsius, and in addition it releases many greenhouse gases. To produce 1 ton of gray hydrogen, 9 to 12 tons of CO2 are emitted. Green hydrogen, the cleanest and most expensive. Green hydrogen is produced with almost no harmful greenhouse gas emissions through the use of electricity from renewable energy sources such as solar or wind energy. It is possible through electrolyzers that use an electrochemical reaction to split water molecules into hydrogen and oxygen. It is the most expensive process, but its price is expected to decrease as the cost of renewable energy and electrolyzers fall. In addition, more and more is invested in its development and infrastructure necessary to produce it abundantly. Another variety of green hydrogen is that produced from biogas using livestock, agricultural and/or urban waste. Decarbonization worldwide will favor the development of new forms of green hydrogen production, without a doubt one of the fuels of the future and one of the great alternatives to electrification, not only in terms of mobility, but also for certain industrial processes or for heavy transport. Blue hydrogen from natural gas. Blue hydrogen is produced mainly from natural gas through a process similar to that of grey hydrogen, although unlike grey hydrogen, part or all of the CO2 emissions emitted can be stored and reused through a carbon capture system. Afterwards, this carbon obtained can be used for other purposes, such as the production of synthetic fuels. It is considered a viable method to reduce emissions in the short and medium term. Black and brown hydrogen, the most polluting. Brown hydrogen is the most opposite to green, as it is obtained from the process of heating black coal, or lignite to more than 700 degrees Celsius. In this way, a gas is obtained from which hydrogen is extracted. It is the oldest form of production, and due to its CO2 emissions, it is the most harmful to the environment. Pink, turquoise, yellow or white hydrogen, the most experimental. Pink hydrogen is generated through nuclear-powered electrolysis. It can also be called purple hydrogen or red hydrogen. As for turquoise hydrogen, it is a more or less recent and experimental way of obtaining hydrogen, since it has not yet been tested on a scale. Essentially, turquoise hydrogen is made through a process called methane pyrolysis, which requires temperatures of around 1,000 degrees Celsius. Instead of generating a CO2 byproduct as in grey hydrogen, it produces a solid carbon waste that does not contribute to the greenhouse effect. In the future, turquoise hydrogen can be valued as low-emission hydrogen, depending on the thermal process being powered by renewable energy and the carbon being permanently stored or used. Yellow hydrogen. When the electricity used to practice hydrolysis comes from a mix of diverse sources, renewable or not. White hydrogen. It is a natural geological hydrogen that is found in underground deposits and is created through fracking by injecting a fluid composed mainly of water at high pressure into rock formations in order to open fissures so that the gas can escape. As we see, hydrogen can be produced from different raw materials, different energy sources, and by different procedures. Thus, depending on the raw material and the energy source used to produce it, we can talk about 100% renewable, 100% fossil or hybrid processes in a certain percentage. According to the latest reports from the International Renewable Energy Agency, in order to meet the emissions reduction targets of the Paris Agreements, a massive expansion of hydrogen production will be necessary in the coming years. The sustainability of green hydrogen. Green hydrogen is a goal, but it faces an obstacle: drought. Data shows that a fifth of green hydrogen projects in the United States will go to water-scarce areas, and in Spain, almost half of hydrogen projects will be in areas of high water stress. Return water to the original source, the only way to make it sustainable. A new green hydrogen plant in the Sonoran Desert, Arizona, is the perfect example of how renewable energy and new technologies confront the problem they are trying to combat: the effects of climate change. And one of the most serious is drought. This plant, which is powered by wind and solar energy, details Clean Technica, will produce hydrogen as fuel for trucks from an underground water source that experts say is not sustainable. The 11,000 metric tons of hydrogen per year that the project plans to produce will require at least 98 million liters and will use between 121 and 170 million liters in total if the additional water needed for purification and cooling is included, according to estimates from Argonne National Laboratory Water Use. This means that if the water needed to produce and operate wind and solar energy is included, And if the excess water from all these processes is not pumped back to the surface or groundwater source, the plant could consume up to 1.2 billion of liters of water that will disappear. It is just one example among the many projects in the United States to produce green hydrogen, and several are located in areas where it does not rain. Of the 18 approved projects that will require a significant amount of fresh water, 4 are located in areas with stress high or extremely high water level. Around the world, most green hydrogen projects are located in regions with this problem, such as the Middle East. That is, in areas where the demand for water is higher than the amount available. It is estimated that by 2050, droughts will affect more than 3/4 of the world's population, and there are already 25 countries with extreme water stress. In fact, in Spain, more than 46% of all operational and planned blue and green hydrogen projects in Spain will be located in areas with high water stress in 2040, and more than 35% of the global green and blue hydrogen production capacity is located in regions with high water stress. Spain is in second place in terms of the number of hydrogen projects in Europe with 79, and is only surpassed by Germany, which has a 104. The main problem that these projects face is drought, a situation that in Spain is increasingly serious. One solution is to locate green hydrogen projects near photovoltaic and wind resources, as well as incentivize the use of water-saving cooling technologies, such as air cooling, and of course, avoid locating hydrogen production projects in regions where water is scarce, something that should be obvious. Green hydrogen production. 99% of hydrogen generated in 2022 has not been green or low emissions. To produce 95 million tons of hydrogen, 900 million tons of CO2 were emitted. This is the main conclusion drawn from the recently presented Global Hydrogen Review 2023 report from the International Energy Agency. Dirty hydrogen produced from fossil fuels is what accounts for all production in practice. According to data from the European Commission, in 2022, hydrogen represented less than 2% of Europe's energy consumption and was mainly used to produce chemicals such as plastics and fertilizers. 96% of this hydrogen was produced with natural gas, generating significant CO2 emissions. Only 0.6% of the hydrogen produced is clean. Although hydrogen is the most abundant element in the periodic table on Earth, it never appears alone, but rather as a chemical compound associated with other elements. In order to use it as a source of clean energy, it must be extracted through production processes that are highly polluting or have a high energy cost. Grey hydrogen obtained from methane is the most common. The minority ones are green hydrogen, which is produced by electrolysis of water using renewable energy, and blue hydrogen from natural gas capturing CO2. Last year, only 0.6% of the 95 million tons of hydrogen produced was clean hydrogen. This should be the basis on which a real future decarbonization of industry and transport is based. Meanwhile, the production of 95 million tons of hydrogen has left 900 million tons of CO2. Although the production of a ton of hydrogen is more polluting than the burning of a ton of coal, 9.47 and 2.88 tons of CO2 respectively, the energy production is also much higher, 40 kilowatt-hour kilogram and 7.25 kilowatt-hour kilogram.